Hello everyone, welcome to Recitals in Depth, where we will analyze all the important articles from the entire month across multiple dimensions. In here, we'll be covering Science and Technology section from the month of July. We'll be covering some important topics like what is the India-Australia space collaboration, what is AI washing, as a new star is going to be exploded soon. What is the process of birth and death of stars? What are transposons? What is dark oxygen? And the other aspects of biotechnology, space science, and general science. For a better learning experience, you can also download the Recitals magazine from our website. So, let's begin our discussion. So, welcome back to the second edition of Recitals in Depth from the month of July. So what are the topics that we are going to cover in this session? These are very interesting ones. The first one is a dual-use chemical, which could be used very well in the self-defense, but can also be acting as a weapon of mass destruction. This recently has been banned by Indian authorities in the Chennai port. This is Ortho-Chloro Benzylidene Malononitrile. The next one is LUCA. LUCA is the first known organism of the world, and it is from where the other branches of eukaryotes, prokaryotes emerged out. So recently, the genome sequencing of LUCA has been successfully achieved. So we shall be looking at this. The next one is a deadly virus similar to that of rabies, who has led to many killings in Gujarat. This is the Chandipura virus. The next one is the uranium contamination, one of the biggest water pollution menace, a geological formation which is naturally and also anthropologically induced into the water bodies, making the water bodies unfit for human consumption. We shall be looking into the uranium contamination scenario in India. In the next one, we shall look into the discovery of neutrinos, a very important subatomic particle with the help of nova. Then we will look into a breakthrough treatment in the snake bites. So for snake bite treatment, a new chemical has been found with the name of tinzapirin. In the next one, we shall be looking into lactic acid bacterium, something which we derive from the dairy products and a very crucial probiotic. Probiotics are even more so important not just for our health but also for preparing UPSC, because in 2023, UPSC examiner has asked prelims questions on probiotics. Then we shall be looking into dark oxygen, something which is created in the absence of photosynthesis of sunlight. Where do they occur and why are they important for us? We shall be looking into that. And finally, looking into ketamine. Ketamine, known as a breakthrough treatment for the patient suffering from depression and other psychotic disorders. So, let's dive deep into our discussion. I welcome you to the first topic of Recitals in Depth. So here's the first topic. The first topic is about a dual-use chemical. What are dual-use chemicals? What are dual-use goods and technologies? And why are we trying to prevent them? And what are the mitigative, or basically what are the preventive measures taken on both Indian level and international level? First of all, let me introduce this chemical to you. This is a synthetic organic compound, which means it is not naturally occurring. But what is it used for? It is a peppery smelling spray which can induce some of the undesirable impacts on the humans. For example, having tear eyes, for example, having tingling sensation, irritating sensation, could also lead to blindness in many cases. So basically, it prominently can be used as an artificial pepper spray, very beneficial for the self-defense, but at the same time, because of its harmful effect, can we also say that it can also be used for military purposes. At many times could be used for terrorist purposes or terrorism purposes, and can also become a mass destruction weapon at hand. These are known as the dual-use goods and technologies, and one such dual-use good right here is this particular compound, which is Ortho-Chloro Benzylidene Malononitrile. Why this particular one has been in news? Because recently the security agencies of India has aborted the shipment of this particular chemical from the ports of Tamil Nadu. And this was a Chinese shipment being carried out. Why? Because we also have certain regulations of these dual-use goods in our trade policy, which is mostly concerned with the Director General of Foreign Trade, which is responsible for regulating the imports and the exports, and primarily the potentially harmful exports from India. So who is responsible for managing the export and import list, or the export and import side of the trade aspect? This is the DGFT, Director General of Foreign Trade. This is from India. Talking about this particular compound, this is also known as CS gas, also known as tear gas, because it can induce tears and therefore can also help in regulating the riots, and therefore also known as the riot controlling agent. Is it naturally occurring? No, it is artificial, it is synthetically made. And why we have prohibited its shipment is because it's a dual use chemical which is listed under many international agreements. What are the international agreements which try to control these dual use goods and technologies? That is going to be our next point of discussion, because it's very important from the examination point of view. Not only is this a regulated or a prohibited dual use chemical, but also it is prohibited under India's export control list. And because India is signatory to many conventions, for example, the Chemical Weapon Convention and the Biological Weapon Convention, therefore, accruing to the compliance, India had to regulate its shipment. Now, this is about this particular chemical, which could also be used for destruction of the mankind. So, for the purposing of non-proliferation, there are multiple agreements acting on it. And why is it really harmful? Because of its harmful effect on human beings, on the lives. Some of the impacts are causing irritation to the eyes, nose, skin. And it's not just a normal irritation, but an intense irritation, so much so that it could also lead to deafness, blindness in many cases, or loss of sensations in many cases. This also causes burning sensation, coughing, difficulty in breathing, creating a condition like asphyxia, and due to lack of oxygen, a person might even faint to death because of this particular gas. Now this is about the Ortho-Chloro Benzylidene gas. How the UPSC examiner could potentially ask a question on this? They will frame a question with the name of this gas, that this currently seen in news is one among the following. Is this a riot controlling agent? Is this a dual use good? Or is this used to regulate the cancer? Or is it used to, let's say, cure some of the communicable diseases? So the correct answer would be 1 and 2. For that, the clarity of what is dual use good and technology is very important. Now think about it. You see the GPS around you, you see the satellites, you see the drones, you see the missiles, all of them. You see, in fact, what is a launching vehicle? Launching vehicle is a form of missile only. Basically, both built on the same technology, but when I'm using it for civilian and space purposes, then the same technology, the same infrastructure is known as a launching vehicle. But if I'm using the same technology for defense purposes, then this is known as a missile. So can't we say that such launching vehicles / missiles are dual use goods or dual use technology? Exactly. Similar to that, the GPS that we use, the satellite that we use, the drones that we use, the missiles that we use, in fact, some of the aluminium knots that we use, aluminium wires that we use, they can act as dual use goods and technology, because they can not only be used for the civilian purposes, but also very well for the military purposes. So think about a mustard gas. Think about a pepper spray only. It could be very much used by the women, especially in the scenario going on in India. It could be used by women for self-defense. But at the same time, if it is used by the police forces, if it is used by some other country against another country, for example, that which was done in World War I, they used the mustard gas in order to control the opponent. So this can also be used as a war agent. And in extreme cases could also be used to harm the civilians. So could also be very much used in the terrorist activities. These are the dual use goods. So naturally, there was a call of need to prevent the proliferation, production, and in fact, use and development of such dual use goods. Not only that, the existing weapons, they also have to be demolished by the signatory countries. But these countries are signatory to which conventions? There are multiple conventions. We will be looking into both international and national aspect. Talking about the international conventions, we have something which is known as export control regime examples. So there are certain multilateral export control regime conventions by the name of MTCR, which intends MTCR or the Missile Technology Control Regime, as the name suggests. It is to regulate the proliferation of drones or the proliferations of missile technology beyond the civilian use. So how does it do that? It does it by putting a cap of transferring the missile technology or missiles or drones which could only carry a weight up to 500 kgs and could also only go to a distance of about 300 kilometers, not beyond it. And only if a country's signatory, a member of this missile technology control regime, then only it will be able to breach this limit, because now the technology transfer could be permitted only among the member countries. That is only among the participant countries and not the non-party countries. Now one question should come to your mind, ma'am, is India a part of MTCR? So you already know that we have got ballistic missiles, we have got BrahMos missiles, and they could go up to the length of 1000 kilometers, could carry weight up to 5000 kilograms. How is that possible? Because of the transfer of technology by Russia, because of transfer of technologies of other advanced countries who are a member of MTCR. And of course, we are permitted to breach this limit because we are also a part of MTCR, which is Missile Technology Control Regime. It was initially signed by the G7 countries and it was launched in the year 1987. India recently signed it in 2017. So this was against the proliferation of two things. First is the missile technology and second is the drone technology. The next convention that we have is the Wassenaar Agreement. Wassenaar Agreement, which is headquartered in Vienna, Austria. So this one started in the year 1996 and it was a voluntary export control organization where many of the primary NATO countries and the European Union countries came together. For what? For the control of dual-use goods and technology. So if there is one convention peculiar to prohibiting the use and development and proliferation of the dual-use goods and technology, for example, the one that we have read, it is the Wassenaar Agreement. Alright. Did India sign it? Yes, as you can see in the map, India is signatory to Wassenaar Agreement and India joined it in the year 2018. Now, India is signatory to MTCR and India is signatory to Wassenaar Agreement as well. So in these two things, India is ticking the boxes. But India is not signatory to something which also controls the proliferation of the nuclear technologies or the nuclear material export. That is the nuclear supply group. And which one is the biggest roadblock? China. So please have a look into the next export control regime, nuclear supplier group. This started in the pretext of India's launching efforts or India's nuclear test effort. Now, do you know that this one started in the year or got established in the year 1974? What else happened in 1974? It was in fact against the response of the nuclear tests that were conducted by India itself. So in response to that, the NSG was created, which is Nuclear Supply Group. The countries who are party to it, only they are allowed to transfer the nuclear material, the fissile materials and the technology among themselves. And the non-country members or the non-party would not be allowed to share these technologies, or which is also known as dual-use good. How is nuclear or anything related to nuclear is a dual-use technology? Because you know that it is also a very good alternative towards a renewable source of energy. Because of nuclear fission reaction or nuclear fusion reaction, we are able to harness huge amount of energy. And not only that, this is a non-conventional source of energy because it is replenishable, right? So it's good for the environment. It's good for the nuclear power plants. When we are using it in the form of nuclear power plant, it is of civilian nature. But when I'm using the same thing, let's say for warfare or for dropping nuclear bombs or for creating them or for exporting those nuclear technologies, then I'm going for the military side of it. Therefore, nuclear technology is a very prominent dual-use good and technology. To control that, NSG was there. There is another clause. Now, do you know that is India a part of NPT or not? Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Also, in the comment box, tell me how many countries in the world have refrained from joining NPT or are not part of NPT. Of course, India is one. One of the prominent reasons of why we are not party to NPT or why we are not party to NSG is because China claims, or China becomes a hurdle and argues that since India is not a part of NPT, it should not be given a party to or a participatory place in the NSG, in the nuclear supply group. And this very question was asked in 2018 UPSC prelims examination. So the difference between NSG and NPT is important for you. What is also important for you is to understand that how China acts as a roadblock, because this could act as a very good pointer in your mains answers. So this is why India is not a party to NSG, but China is a party. Now look at the scenario of China. China is not party to the Australia group, which we shall be covering. It's not party to MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime. It's not even party to the Wassenaar group. The only place in which it is party is the NSG. And therefore, India could not become a party because of the China's strong stance. So now you've understood that the third kind of dual use good, which is nuclear technology, that is also rendered regulated by NSG. Now coming to the Australia group. So 10 years later to NSG formation, that is in the year 1985 took the formation of Australia group. What is the importance of Australia group? It tries to control the dual use of chemical weapons and biological weapons. We were just talking about the chemical weapon only in this particular topic, right? So both of them are regulated by Australia group. Australia group was formulated in response to the Iran-Iraq war, which is happening in the decade of 1980s, where a lot of chemical weapons were being used. You should also know that while biological weapon is also a thing, it was regulated even previous to the World War II, during the First World War only, under a Geneva Protocol. Please remember, under Geneva Protocol of 1925, the biological weapons were controlled. Biological weapons were controlled, making it the first dual-use good and technology to be controlled at the time. It's during the time of it's after the time of First World War and before the time of Second World War. But the chemical weapons were still not regulated, and they were very prominently used not just in the Second World War, but also primarily in the Iraq-Iran war. And therefore, there was a use of initiating a formal group, obviously a voluntary group. So this was the Australia group. Is India party to it? Absolutely. In 2017, India joined Australia group. So India is also a party to it. Is China a party to Australia group? Not at all. Is Russia a party to Australia group? Not at all. Okay. So we have looked into all these. Now bring your focus to the kind of question UPSC asks in the prelims examination. They ask about the Talanoa or under two collision. They ask about certain dialogues. They ask about certain code of conduct. They could also ask about something which is the Hague Code of Conduct. Hague Code of Conduct. Talking about Hague, does it make you recall a city which is also secretariat of a very prominent United Nations organization? If you can recall that, good to go. You can also answer that so that I can see how many of you have recalled it. Anyway, talking about the Hague Code of Conduct, it is against the proliferation, or it's an international treaty or a code of conduct to regulate the proliferation of the ballistic missiles. So under which of the codes will it come? The Hague Code of Conduct would come under the Missile Technology Control Regime, or the MTCR. Is India a party to the Hague Code of Conduct? Absolutely, because we are a party to MTCR. So these are the international regimes that we follow. Of course, India herself has got an export control policy, and that got initiated in the year 2000. So India, under its 2000 export control regime policy, has maintained, or first of all has authorized whom to control the export list. This is the DGFT. We have already talked about it. So via 2000 Act of export control, India authorizes the Director General of Foreign Trade to regulate the trade. So how do we understand or how do we pre-specify whether some of the goods are dual use and they have to be regulated or not? For that, DGFT maintains something which is known as the SCOMET list. The SCOMET list. So this question can also be asked and you can use it in the dual use question if asked in mains examination. What does SCOMET simplify for? So this is specialty chemicals. Can you name a specialty chemical? Methanol could be a specialty chemical. Mustard gas could be a specialty chemical. The Ortho-Chloro benzylamide that we have just read, that is also a specialty chemical. Why? Because it has dual use properties. Second is organisms. For example, microbes, bacteria, viruses, pathogens, which could potentially be used as, let's say, probiotics, or let's say using them in genetic modification. Those organisms could also become a biological threat, a biological warfare agent. So these organisms are also prohibited. Next is some of the special materials. For example, the nuclear materials, some of the equipments which can be having dual uses, for example, the aluminium ball bearings, and technologies, for example, the missile technology. Because if they are used, or first of all, they have to be heavily regulated when it comes to their export, and they have to be licensed. First, you have to get the license for their export, only then you can export into them. So they are heavily regulated. So this is the SCOMET list, which is maintained by DGFT. So this is the policy followed in India. Now, coming back to the reference of UPSC examination, if you are asked about the chronology in which India has joined the following export control regimes, then the order would be of this abbreviation, and this abbreviation is M, W and A. Could also be remembered as MUVA, okay, or MIVA. So Missile Technology Control Regime, India signed this in the year 2016. Wassenaar, it signed in the year 2017, and Australia, it signed it in the year 2018. So please remember this chronology. In India, obviously, it's not a part of NSG, so we don't need to bother about it. So this is the MIVA acronym which you need to remember. I might have shuffled the dates in the previous explanation, but take this particular date and chronology as the final and the accurate one. Now, the other two conventions which we are part of are Chemical Weapon Convention and the Biological Weapon Convention. Let's quickly have a differentiation between both of them. Here, the dual use good that we are going to control is chemical, and here it is the biological good or technology. So for the first time, this got into effect, or it was ratified. So basically the talks were in the United Nations since 1992, but finally got ratified by all the nations by 1997, by all the party nations by 1997. Biological Weapon Convention was preceded by the Geneva Protocol. Geneva Protocol, which was in 1925, as I've already told you, and the Biological Weapon Convention finally got ratified in the year 1985. So the year of commencement, you should know India has ratified both of these conventions. In fact, India has its own Chemical Weapon Convention protocol under the Act of 2000 again. So under that Act, India also maintains a list. So what happens, all the member countries which are party to both the conventions not only have to prohibit the stockpiling, the production, the development of these weapons, but also have to declare the list of the weapons that they are owning, the list of the chemical weapons or the biological potential agents that they are owning, and they also have to gradually destroy them. So these conventions also talk about not just prohibiting, they talk about prohibiting, but also destruction in stipulated time. So the countries have to maintain the list, reveal the details of the list, prohibit the trade, prohibit the export, development, production, stockpiling, but also eventually destroy the existing stocks of these chemicals and these biological weapons, whichever are there, because something like corona, something like a pandemic could happen because of this biological weapon convention, something of a very notorious sort like killing millions of people just because they were exposed to one gas. How you know already about the Bhopal gas tragedy. So all of these things can happen because of chemical weapons. So India is signatory to both of them. What is their objective? When were they ratified? That we have read. And these are something which have led to the regulation of chemical weapons. Talking about the chemical weapons, don't we already have the Basel Convention, the Rotterdam Convention and the Stockholm Convention? So these also regulate the trade of the harmful or the hazardous chemical substances. Could be a persistent organic pollutant or could be some other chemical which is getting leached out of waste or improper waste management. So India is signatory to 3 of them or not? So if a question comes to you that you have to talk about the regulatory measures brought in forward by the international organizations for regulation of chemical weapons, how many are there? There is Australia Group for the regulation of chemical weapon and biotechnology and biological and toxin weapons. Then we have got the Chemical Weapon Convention. We have got the Biological Weapon Convention. This is also known as BTWC, which is Biological Toxin Weapon. And we have also got the Basel Convention. We have got Rotterdam Convention, Stockholm Convention. Now that this topic is clear to us, let us understand why have I taught you so deeply, because it is very important in UPSC, occurred twice in the PYQ. Let's have a look. So here is the first question asked in the year 2011. Therefore, PYQs are a short key to cracking the prelims because you will see the pattern of repetition. Here the question is, recently USA decided to support India's membership in the multilateral export control regime. USA is just supporting because we know that in the year 2016, 17, 18 respectively, we'll be joining all of these regimes. But back in the day, they are asking about the Australia Group. Australia Group is for what? Australia Group is intended to control the chemical weapons and the biological weapons. Wassenaar is for the dual use goods and technologies. So first question, Australia Group is an informal agreement which aims to allow exporting countries to minimize the risk of assisting chemical and biological weapon proliferation. Till here it is correct. Then whereas the Wassenaar arrangement is a formal group under the OECD holding identical objective, no, because it is particularly for the dual use good and it is not under OECD. Correct? So this is again an informal group under a lot of party countries, about 42 party countries, for the objective of controlling dual use good and technology. So first statement is incorrect. Second statement, Australia Group comprises predominantly of Asian, African and North American countries, whereas the members of Wassenaar arrangement are predominantly from the European Union and American continent. So we have already seen the map. So can you observe, this is the map of party countries of Wassenaar arrangement. Are they only from the NATO countries and the EU countries? No. Some of the countries like Argentina, Chile, some of the countries like South Africa, India, Australia, they are also party to it. And likewise for the Australia Group also. So to say that they are predominantly from some particular blocks, that is not true. So second statement is also incorrect. Now the next question. Again, Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapon. This organization will come under which convention? It will come under the Chemical Weapon Convention. And which treaty is regulating the chemical weapon? It is the Australia Group. So similarly, these two PYQs are quite in linkages. Anyway, this consider the following statement. It's an organization of the EU working in relation with NATO and WHO. No, it's an organization under the Chemical Weapon Convention. So this statement is incorrect. Second, it monitors the chemical industry. Of course, something which is an organization to prevent the use of chemical weapon would look after, would monitor the industries naturally. Second statement is correct. Then it provides assistance and protection to states against the chemical weapon threat. Of course, it provides. That is why it is instituted under the Chemical Weapon Convention. In which year Chemical Weapon Convention was adopted? I've just now told. Just to aid your recalling ability, I'm asking you that and you have to answer it in the comment section. Okay, so now let's move on to the next topic. This next topic is about LUCA. or the last universal common ancestor. As the name suggests, this is that point in the evolutionary tree. Evolutionary trees tell us that how we have originated, from which branch of the tree, and how many branches have been there, and what are the co and sub branches, and where the other organisms belong to. So are we a part of eukaryote or prokaryote? You tell me. Of course we are a part of eukaryote, and also more developed part of eukaryote. What is the reason for that? What is the difference between a prokaryote and a eukaryote? That is the first thing we are going to learn here. So prokaryote means, so first of all, karyote means a kernel. Prokaryote means a premature kernel or a premature cell. A premature cell is something which is lacking the cell wall or the wallic stability. Is something which is also not having inbuilt cell organelles in it. For example, mitochondria. In fact, the nucleic acid, something which is comprising of the DNAs, the RNAs, that is also not surrounded by a well-defined membrane in the case of prokaryotes. Some of the bacteria as an example, archaea are examples of prokaryotes. Then what is the example of eukaryote? Eu in French means good, and karyote means a cell. So cell which is more defined, having internal organelles, for example, mitochondria and your endoplasmic reticulum and ribosomes, etc. When they are well defined in structure, and the nucleic acid is well stored inside a nucleus, which is also well defined by a nucleus wall, and is also comprising of cytoplasm with a well defined cell wall, then that is known as a eukaryote. Okay, so talking about all of these things, when we bring them into a branched form to understand where they all evolved from, that is known as an evolutionary tree, where the three domains of life which initially initiated the life, for example, some of us tell that it is a cyanobacteria which for the first time populated the earth in the form of organisms. But it's not just cyanobacteria. There were other forms of life, for example, archaea, for example, eukarya. So they all diverge from one single point, because we know, anyway, we jokingly call it that what came first, the hen or the egg? Which one came first? Similarly, which one came first? It was actually LUCA or the last universal common ancestor. And recently, the good news is genetic profiling of this very important organism has been done. Is this particular organism just one organism? No, it's a family of organisms which eventually mutated and evolved into the three branches. Branches are bacteria, archaea and eukarya. If you divide them into prokaryotes or eukaryotes, the bacteria and archaea primarily came under prokaryotes, and then eukarya came under eukaryotes. But of course, if we talk about the similarity, the structural similarity, we can differentiate it as bacteria versus archaea plus eukarya, because both of them are similar in structures. Now, what is a LUCA? Is it a living entity or is it a theoretical entity? Of course, something that is dating back as the last ancestor of organism, last common ancestor, is not something that we practically have it with ourselves in the world right now. So, of course, it's a theoretical identity. For example, the Higgs boson is a theoretical identity. This is a theoretical identity in biology, which represents the most recent organism from which all the organisms of the world have descended. Okay, and it lived about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. So there is no point in even assuming that we might be even having fossils of it. So this is just a theoretical entity. Now let's quickly bring our attention into the three different branches of life. One is bacteria, archaea and eukarya. So of course I've told you that both of them are prokaryotic in nature primarily, and eukarya is eukaryotic in nature, as the name suggests. Some of the important bacteria are the cyanobacteria, which causes photosynthesis in the water bodies. Prominently, the oceans for the first time got flooded by one among the first known organisms, and those were the cyanobacteria. Because of their overgrowth, it led to the oxygen explosion in the world. So what led to the creation of oxygen gases? There were many reasons, but primarily was the photosynthesis done by cyanobacteria. The bacteroids, cytophaga, etc., they are also a part of bacteria. The gram-positives, they are also part of bacteria. Now coming to those kind of prokaryotes which can exist in very harsh conditions. For example, very deep in the water where no light could come, in very saline condition where no organism could potentially do or function because of lack of osmosis, or in very high temperature areas or in very cold temperature areas, basically in areas where temperature extremities can be seen, only these organisms can survive, and these are the archaea. Some of the example of archaeas are halophiles, salt loving. In fact, they are intensively halophiles. These are also thermophiles. They can also live in areas where excess amount of methane gas is present. So methanococcus bacteria also come under archaea. So archaeas live in extreme conditions. They can live in extreme condition. And now comes the most developed form of organism in the form of eukaryotes. So the bacteria that you see, the fungi that you see, so the plants, the animals, the fungi, the flagellates, all of them are part of eukaryotes. So this question can also be asked, that which among the following come under the category of eukaryotes or eukaryotes? Are bacteria a part of it? No. Are viruses a part of it? No. But fungi are a part of eukarya family. Animals and plants are a form of eukarya family. So whatever you imagine as having more well-defined cell wall, cell structure, cell organelles, those comes under eukarya. Let's quickly do a quick differentiation between three of them. So now let's try to distinguish them on multiple parameters. The first one is what is the cell type. So in the case of bacteria, it is a prokaryote. In the case of archaea, again, it's a prokaryote. What is the meaning of prokaryote? That I have already told you. And in the case of eukarya, it's a eukaryote. Okay. Now talking about the membrane lipids. So what are the membrane lipids? Or basically, what is it comprises of what? Its membrane comprises of what? So in the case of bacteria, because these are the most simplest forms, so they comprise of only linear chain fatty acids. So linear chain fatty acids. In the case of archaea, it could be linear, but prominently it is branched. So here the membrane is more robust, and because it is branched, it is robust, it is able to survive in the extreme conditions. Of course, in eukarya, because it is more developed form of organization of an organism, so this also contains branched fatty acids. Next is the cell wall composition. So if at all there is a cell wall, it comprises of peptidoglycan. Now, we don't need to dive too much into it. What is a peptidoglycan? But please remember that peptidoglycan, while it is present in bacteria, it is not present in archaea, it is not present in eukarya. Okay. Next one is the antibiotic sensitivity. Which among the following is most sensitive to the antibiotics? The one which we can kill very easily, that is the bacteria. In fact, most of the antibiotics are actually antibacterials. So, it is most effective. The antibiotic sensitivity is highest for the bacteria. Then it is low for the archaea. Therefore, it is difficult to destroy the archaea. And it is also lower for the eukarya. For example, the plants and the animals. So even if we consume the antibiotics, they will not be able to clear up all the biotic fauna that we have inside us. Why? Because we are not that much sensitive. The plants, the higher level organisms are not. The plants or the higher level organisms are not very much sensitive towards the antibiotics. So the highest sensitivity is for bacteria. Next is RNA. Don't go into much technicality of it. Just remember that all of them are unique. All of them have different or unique RNA structures. Next is environment. Bacteria are ubiquitous. Ubiquitous means they can live in almost all the kind of environment. But who can live in the most harsh environment among all of these three? It is archaea. So in the harshest of environment lives the archaea. Okay. And of course, this is ubiquitous, means they can be prevalent everywhere in the earth. Next is the form of reproduction, because both of them are prokaryotes. So how will they be reproducing? It will be an asexual mode of reproduction. Asexual mode. In the case of eukarya, it is predominantly a sexual mode of reproduction. What are the examples? Example of bacteria is cyanobacteria. Example of archaea is halophiles, thermophiles, methanophiles or methanococcus. Example of eukarya is plants, animals, fungi, etc. And whether they have the membrane-bound organelles or not. So of course, because this is a prokaryote, it will not be having membrane-bound organelles. It will also not be having. Whether this will be having or not, try to guess. This will be having membrane-bound organelles because it is a eukaryote. So I hope you've understood the difference between three of them. Why is it important? Because UPSC has already asked question where you were asked to differentiate or have a clearer understanding between plant cells and animal cells. So I'll ask that question to you, whether it is the plant cell or the animal cell which has got more and larger number of vacuoles. And if one is having larger number of vacuoles, what is the reason behind it? So that is the question, you try to answer it. Now next one is a very basic news, actually not pretty much for our use. This is about the Chandipur or the Chandipur virus. Now Chandipur beach is located where? In Odisha. So do not confuse it with the fact that it is infecting the people or it has infected the people of Gujarat. So Chandipur virus, which also belongs to the rabies virus family. Whether rabies comes under Mission Indradhanush or not, it comes under Mission Indradhanush or not. We have already discussed Mission Indradhanush in the previous lectures of recitals. So I hope you will be able to answer it. And even if you are not able to answer, please search about it, because curiosity is the best way to learn things. It's the best way to grab knowledge. If you're not curious about, if you're not genuinely curious about things, then you will never be able to appreciate it and the brain will never be able to recall or remember it. So the first point is be very curious about whatever you are learning. Now, talking about Chandipur virus, it is associated with the encephalitic illness. Encephalitic illness generally refers to a situation in which the brain tissues gets inflated. So the inflammation in the brain tissues leads to encephalitis. So this is also kind of encephalitic illness, which means it's related to which part of the body? Brain. Okay, so therefore this is also known as Chandipur encephalitis. It was first identified not in the 2023 year or 2024 year, but in 1965 in the Chandipur village, not of Odisha but of Maharashtra, during a dengue outbreak. Okay. It comes under a broader category of acute encephalitic syndrome. Here, a list of neurological manifestations can take place, could also lead to the death of the children. Primarily, it affects the brain tissues of the children. So, it leads to lot of neurological manifestations, predominantly the inflammation of the brain tissue. And what are the causative agents? There's not just one. It could be because of virus or bacteria or fungi. So it could be because of fungus, bacteria, virus, parasite, chemicals, toxins also. And there is etc. word. So if a question will come that these are the following things which is causing the acute encephalitic syndrome, then the answer would be, of course, yes. Now, is encephalitic vaccine a part of our Mission Indradhanush or not? Again, think about it. Next is, how is it transmitted or what are the vectors associated with it? So transmission primarily takes place under the dirty conditions, unhygienic conditions taken up by parasites like sandflies and mosquitoes. They could be carrying the fungus or the virus or the bacteria which could lead to the encephalitic infection. Okay, and it can also be transmitted through direct contact with the infected human or with the infected animal. So it is again it could also be a zoonotic disease. But it is not just a zoonotic disease, it is also communicable disease, but also comes under this class. What are the symptoms now? So symptoms would obviously be a very sharp immune response from the body. So whenever that happens, we get the rashes, we get the fever, we get the chills. Those are the common things. We get headache. Okay, the muscle starts contracting, which is known as convulsions will happen, and it will also in many cases lead to some severity in the health consequences, could also lead to death. That is acute encephalitis. Next is, what is the impact? Predominantly infects the children because their brain tissues are expanding or multiplying more rapidly as compared to that of a full-grown man. So under 15 are the most vulnerable class of people who can suffer from this outbreak. And what is the treatment? There is no specific antiviral treatment or vaccine available. Only supportive care, only preventive care could be provided. But in the case of Japanese encephalitis, that is included in our Indradhanush program, which is the vaccine of Japanese encephalitis is there with us. So our next topic is about the uranium contamination in India. This one is very important because it not only renders us unhealthy, not only leads to a lot of diseases, for example, cancer in the Indian population, but also causes ecological imbalance in water, causes water pollution, causes air pollution, has health impact. So the adversity is so great that we need to bring our focus into the uranium contamination menace that is prevalent in India. And why is it so? We'll be looking into that. First of all, about the uranium element. Uranium element, as you know, the atomic number is 92 and the mass is 235 or 238 for the isotope. This is the mass, and with that mass it becomes the heaviest naturally occurring radioactive element in the world, which means a radioactive element of that weight, for it to be naturally occurring, it has to be uranium only. So it is available in natural quantities because it is radioactive, therefore capable of producing nuclear energy. So currently in our nuclear programs, we are using uranium. And is India able to create, or is India self-sufficient in uranium amounts? No. India generally imports the uranium, but the places which produces good amount of uranium, potentially economically amount of uranium is the Jadugoda. And where is Jadugoda located? It is located in Jharkhand. So here is where the most economical mines of uranium are there in India, but of course in order to feed or to breed our nuclear reactors, we have to import most of the uranium. Now, it generally comes from many of the treaties that we have signed with USA and Russia. Also the Treaty of 123, it makes us import the uranium because we know that we are not a part of nuclear supplier group. So therefore, the import of uranium becomes very difficult for us, and therefore we are trying to move towards the second radioactive element which is available, that is thorium. So thorium is heavily present in India in the monazite sands of Kerala, and also in the other coasts of the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats, but primarily in the monazite sand of Kerala. The only reason why we are not able to use thorium is because we are not adept with the technology which can create proper fission and controlled fission of the thoriums. We have the technology for uranium, but we are trying to build it for the thoriums, which will cater to the third stage of our nuclear program. Okay, this is about the uranium metal or the uranium element. This is radioactive in nature. If it is radioactive, it could explode about anywhere and it could cause a lot of atomic reactions, but it doesn't happen like that. Why? Because it is weak in its atomic activity and therefore it is easier to control it. Therefore, the technologies are more adept in controlling the nuclear fission of uranium as compared to anyone else. Why? Because it is less radioactive. Why is it less radioactive? Because of the longer half cycle. So the half cycle, that is, let's say when 1 grams of uranium will, because of radioactivity, will finally disintegrate into half-life is that point when upon disintegration 1 gram of a radioactive substance would get reduced to half its amount. That is 1 kilograms, let's say, would get reduced to 500 grams, which means it is disintegrated. So this for uranium is very long and therefore it is not that much radioactive or explosive. Now, talking about the uranium contamination, how is it getting contaminated, especially in the water bodies and reservoirs of India? And what are the causes? So, for the contamination of uranium, which is, by the way, naturally found in not just soil, but also in water, but also in ground, but also in the rocks, in almost all the geological formation, the causes for its contamination are both natural and anthropogenic. Let's have a look into it. So, when we talk about the causes, there are natural causes and there are anthropogenic causes. So please remember and understand them carefully. First one is the geological formation. The geological formation of the rocks. So we know that if you talk about the structure of the earth, it comprises of a core, it comprises of mantle, and it comprises of upper mantle, and it comprises of crust. Now you know that there is radioactive or convective currents flowing in the mantle, which is of liquid nature. What is making it liquid? It is the radioactive substance, especially the uranium contamination here. So a lot of uranium is present in the mantle rocks, and it is leading to melting of these rocks. Of course, it will happen due to convective currents that these rocks might penetrate into the depths of crust. So the deeper crust or the lower crust might also be having some of the rocks which are heavily contaminated by uranium. Where is the uranium coming from? It's coming from the mantle. It could also leach into some of the parts of Earth's lower crust. Because if you dig too much deeper, and because we naturally have uranium in some of the rocks, if these rocks find a way to the surface of the earth, naturally they will be having uranium in them. So uranium contamination for the first happens because of geological reasons. Second, let's say if the rock is still very deep, how then it could penetrate inside the water bodies? What facilitates the hydrolysis or the solubility of the uranium into the water? Because by the way, it's not very soluble in nature. It is not, you cannot dissolve uranium very easily in the water. What facilitates its absorption in the water is, first of all, the bicarbonate content of the rock. So let's say this rock is having bicarbonate content, which means these are the bicarbonate ions. So uranium, when it combines with the bicarbonate ions, it becomes more soluble in water. It becomes more soluble in water, right? So first is because of the presence of bicarbonate ions in the rocks. And the second one is having nitrate chemical in the water. So if nitrate is there in the water or in the rocks, then also uranium becomes highly soluble. So these are the two reasons why, because of the water and the rock interaction, the uranium penetrates into the water, especially in the underground waters, because uranium rocks are found in very deep beneath the earth crust. Okay, so only if the reservoir is very deep inside, then only the concentration would be higher. If you go up and above the water table, the concentration will gradually reduce. But here comes the anthropogenic reasons of rising uranium contamination. First of all, are the agricultural activities that we are taking up, which requires a lot of irrigation. Irrigation primarily comes from the groundwater. India has the highest consumption of groundwater when it comes to feeding its agriculture. When I'm digging too much deep in the wells, of course, I will make a water and rock contact between the rocks, which could potentially be carrying a lot of uranium in them, correct? So the first thing is over-drilling of the wells, of the water bodies, of the reservoirs. So this, because of our agricultural irrigation needs, could lead to leaching of the uranium inside the wells. And these wells, these waters are then going to be used in our food crops, and these food crops, when we consume it, it enters into our food chain. Correct? So first is the over-exploitation of water table or over-drilling of water. Second is our waste management practices. We might be using nuclear waste, for example, uranium, for nuclear energy generation. And if I'm improperly disposing it, then what will happen? It can enter again into our ecosystem and definitely into our food chain. So improper waste management is another reason. Second is, you also know that we use a lot of fertilizers. Fertilizers could also consist of nitrates. And I've told you, whenever nitrates or whenever bicarbonates are present in large amount, then it leads to increased solubility of uranium in the water bodies. And this is the reason why some of the most prominent agrarian states of India have breached the permissible limits of uranium very, very highly. So for example, we have got Punjab and we have got Haryana. Do you know what is the permissible limit? Well, the news about this, why are we reading about this, is that BIS, the Bureau of Indian Standard, which basically sets the permissible limits of the consumption of any toxic element. Every toxic element has got a permissible limit. In fact, mercury, which is very toxic in nature, has also got some permissible limit. This question was asked in UPSC, so therefore I'm bringing clarity for it. Any whichever way. We were talking about Haryana and Punjab. So do you know what is the permissible limit? It is 30 grams. It is 30 parts per billion. Please remember, unlike the other elements, which is parts per million, it is parts per billion. This is the permissible limit permitted by the BIS, by the Bureau of Indian Standards. And why this particular article is in news? Because the BIS is now thinking of shifting this 30 limit to 60 parts per billion. Why? Because it says that many countries, for example Slovakia and Finland, they do follow higher levels of permissible limit. For example, 100 for Slovakia and 70 for Finland. Okay, so we can also probably increase this limit to 60. Permissible limit to 60, because if we don't do that, then the entire India would be red flagged, because each and every state has got more contamination. In fact, natural geogenic contamination of uranium. Okay, so I was talking about Punjab and Haryana. Do you know, as compared to the permissible limit, let's say the 31, it is 500 parts per billion, and therefore Punjab is a typical case study of a lot of cancer happening due to consumption of water which is contaminated by uranium. Because uranium, it is a heavy duty chemical. It is radioactive in nature. So definitely upon consumption beyond this permissible limit, what will happen? It will lead to creation of cancers in our body. It is also nephrotoxic. So what are the causes or what are the health impacts of uranium if they are consumed beyond the permissible limit? Talking about the impacts, the first organ which it definitely destroys and destructs is the kidney. It hates kidney because kidney is not able to filter out this heavy element because it is so heavy, as you can see. So the first thing is it is nephrotoxic, which is nephrons are the unit of kidneys. So it is nephrotoxic. It leads to kidney failure. In many cases, it leads to cancer. Building of the disease of cancer. In the case of Jadugoda, as we have already heard, that a lot of miners, a lot of people living in Jadugoda are suffering from kidney failures, renal failures, and also cancers. These two case studies, which we have already covered in the recital, should be there in your answer copies as well. First is the case study of rising cases of cancer-led death in the state of Punjab, where uranium contamination is high as 500 parts per billion, and the second case study should be of Jadugoda of Jharkhand. Okay, so it also leads to cancer. It also leads to brain tissue damage. It also affects all the other body parts as well, but also leads to decomposition of bones. So these are the primary health impacts, but not only that, it also impacts the plants, it also impacts the other microorganisms, the animals which consume such water. So basically, because it contaminates the very basic need of life, that is water, it is very detrimental. Then what can we do to basically stop this uranium contamination menace and how to deal with it? So first of all, it all starts with a proper and responsible waste management. So we should be doing the waste management in accordance with our waste management policies, in accordance with the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions of Waste Management. Then we should also try certain techniques. For example, we should be inducing chelating agents. Chelating agents. So chelating agents are responsible for binding themselves to the uranium molecules present inside the water, and then after that you can filter it out so that water can be separated. The uranium material can be separated from water. Of course, this requires a lot of investment. So the first thing is the financial investment or the financial prudence that should be coming from from the side of government, from the side of civil society organizations, from the side of NGOs, for example, so that water, especially of these areas, these agrarian areas, should be made safer for use. Okay, so that can be done by using or adding chelating elements and then filtering them out. Second, you can also do phytoremediation. You can remediate the water by inducing or growing crops along the water bodies. For example, crops like mustard, sunflower, they are excellent for absorbing the concentration of uranium inside them and therefore making the water more clearer. So the second one is phytoremediation, remediation with the help of plants. And which plants are we going to use? We are going to use mustard and primarily sunflower. So they can be also grown in these states. So this is how we will be able to deal with the uranium contamination and related health issues that it possesses. Now coming to the next topic, here an experiment NOVA was getting conducted to study the neutrinos better. And it has got some insightful observations, so we'll be reading that. But before that, what are neutrinos? Do you know what is the most abundant atomic particle in the world, in the universe in fact? It is light or photons. Photons, which are the fundamental unit of light. And which one is the second most abundant particle? It is nothing but neutrinos. Neutrinos are not the atomic particles. They are not the neutrons and the protons and the electrons. They are the subatomic particles. So if you try to break the protons, electrons or neutrons, you will get something which are known as hadrons, leptons, etc., muons, and one among them also are the neutrinos. Neutrinos are not having any charges, so they do not interact with the matter. In fact, talking about the matter, if a question gets asked to you that which is the particle which is most abundant in the universe when it comes to matter, or a form of matter which is most abundant in the universe, then it is not photon, because it is wave particle. It is in fact neutrinos. So neutrinos are the most abundant form of matter in the universe. Neutrinos right now are also passing through you and me, between the camera, between you and me, and we are not even aware of it, because neutrinos are everywhere, even if we cannot see it, because they do not interact with the matter. It's not possible to see them, but they are the resources to unlock the mystery of the universe as to how the universe was made, how multiple particles are interacting from each other, what is dark matter, what is dark energy, and what are the driving forces behind them. All of this could be uncovered with the help of discovery of neutrinos. If something is not interacting with anything, how are we able to identify them? With the help of masses that they contain, with the help of the sources of their explosion, or from where they originated, which is primarily the big giants, that is the black holes, the neutrino stars. They lead to the production of neutrinos, and therefore they are everywhere. Of course, if we want to study about them, we need to have deep research laboratories for them. One such laboratory is the NOVA laboratory. So NOVA laboratory, which also stands for NOMI of axis V appearance. It is designed to determine the role of neutrinos in the evolution of the cosmos. What it does, it creates a beam of neutrino first of all. It creates a beam of neutrinos because it is not possible to catch the neutrino. Why? Because you can never see it, it's not interacting with the matter. And therefore it is able to not just come from you to me, but also pass through me, pass through the wall. It can pass through anything. So the first thing to study is to create it. So it creates a beam of neutrinos that flies towards the detector. Okay, it is done by trying to understand which type of neutrino has the most mass and which type has the least. And with the help of this, we are able to study the neutrinos. So the one thing that we've understood is neutrinos do not interact with the matter. They do not have any charge. But what they have is mass. They have mass. Now, phenomena of neutrino oscillation occurs when a neutrino created with one flavor changes to another flavor as it travels. So which means that it can spin. So there is no charge, but it has got a spin. And when spin changes, or when this flavor changes, we are able to detect change in the momentum of neutrino, and this is how we are able to detect it. And that is the working principle behind NOVA. Now let's quickly learn about the subatomic particles. So you know that matters previously were known to be made up of the most basic element, that is an atom. Then we further got to know with the help of James Chadwick, etc., that it is actually the further subatomic particles like electrons, protons and neutrons which are making up a matter. But can we break them further? And when we read about the processes of universe, we were able to understand that there are further subatomic particles. So all the matter that you see around you could be classified into two forms. One which is containing essentially the masses, second which contains essentially of the energy. So all the matter around you, first of all, can be classified on the basis of energy and mass. One which consists of energy are the bosons. Higgs boson, the first particle ever known to explode and create the universe that you see around you, also known as God particle. This is named after This is named after Satyendranath Bose, to commemorate his contribution in the particle physics. The second one, which primarily comprises of the masses, are the fermions. Now, let's further classify the bosons. Can be classified into photons and the other part of bosons and gluons. Just remember that these three are the types of bosons. But more importantly, containing ourselves to the knowledge which is required for UPSC, remember that photons are a part of boson family. Next, which contains of masses are broadly divided into leptons and hadrons. So do you know that the protons and the neutrons that is contained inside the nucleus of any atom, they are a part of hadrons. So the protons and the neutrons are coming under hadron category. Okay, then leptons are the ones which can further be classified into electrons and the neutrinos, and can also be classified into taus and muons. We will be reading greater details about the particle physics in maybe the upcoming lecture of recitals, because we have to limit it into a certain length of lecture. But anyway, just remember that photons belong to bosons. Photons are subatomic particles. Protons and neutrons belong to hadrons. They are again subatomic particles. And neutrinos and electrons together come into the category of leptons. This basic information is something which you should inculcate into your science and tech notes. Now, talking about the sources or the forces which binds all of these particles together. So you know which is the weakest force around us, something which binds the most heaviest of the bodies together? The gravity. Gravity, which binds the entire universe, the entire solar system, let's say, together, is the weakest force found in the universe. So the weakest force is gravity. And then more stronger one is the weak nuclear force, then electromagnetism, residual strong force, and the strong force or the nuclear force. So the strong nuclear force is the most strongest force in the universe. Why? Because it is able to bind the subatomic particles like the hadrons and the leptons together. And therefore, which is the fundamental force which is strongest in nature? It is not gravitational force, it is not electromagnetic one, but it is the strong nuclear force. So please understand the hierarchy. Hierarchy goes from this is the least, to this, which is the highest. Okay. Now, moving on to the next topic, this is about tinzapirin. So, tinzapirin, recently seen in news, is related to what? It is related to an effective snake bite treatment against the most deadliest of the snake bite, which is done by king cobra. So, it has the ability of beating the cobra venom as well. So this is the tinzapirin. This is going to be a breakthrough in the snake bite treatment, especially in the regions where the snake bite morbidity is too high. For example, the South India, the Deccan India, for example, South America, Africa continent. So there where the snake bite disease are too high, that is where tinzapirin can now be used. So as we are talking about the venom that is spitted out of a snake, you must also know for the clarity that among all the snake species that we have in the world, not all of them emit venom, which means some of the snakes are not even venomous. They are non-venomous. Of course, they are poisonous. They could have certain ill effects in the body, but they are not venomous, which means they will not lead to immediate death. Okay, and so far we are not having any particular success in the anti-snake bite treatment. So tinzapirin could be a breakthrough over here. Talking about this one, this is administered near the abdominal area with the help of injection. So tinzapirin is a chemical which is basically an anticoagulating agent. What do we mean by that? It reduces the chances of clotting of the blood, and as a result of this, it helps the blood to spit out the venom out of it, or it cancels out the effect of venom. So this is what? An anticoagulation medication which also acts as a heparin. Heparin is also known as blood thinner. It doesn't lead the blood coagulation, because if blood starts coagulating, the venom inside the body will also start getting concentrated within the blood vessels, leading to immediate death. So what we would like to do, dilute the blood vessels, and this is done by a kind of heparin, or a kind of heparin which is manufactured artificially. This is tenzopirin. Okay, so what it does, it inhibits the formation of blood clots in the veins, reducing the conditions of deep vein thrombosis or pulmonary embolism. Okay, it also stops the venom's interaction with the blood vessels directly or with the organs directly. So it also reduces the chances of organ failure, immediate organ failure due to consumption of venom. Now you might ask that, ma'am, what is the relevance of this topic with respect to UPSC examination? The relevance is mostly related to the species in news, which is a snake, because about snakes UPSC has asked question about 4 times. So let's have a look into it. In the year 2019, UPSC has asked the following: some species of turtles are herbivores, some species of fish are herbivores, and some species of snakes are viviparous. For that, we need to understand different modes of reproduction, that is how the legs are or how the child is born out of a mother. So is it oviparous, viviparous, or is it ovoviviparity? So first of all, what is oviparity? Coming from the word ovum. So it stands for a mode of reproduction in which direct laying of the eggs happens. So the reproduction process basically happens outside the body of the mother. This is oviparity. So you must have seen a lot of snakes hatching their eggs. So of course, some of the snakes are oviparous. Most of the snakes though are viviparous, which means they can give birth directly to their young ones from the mother body. Of course, humans are viviparous. Some are also ovoviviparous. Ovoviviparous is, first of all, laying the eggs out of the body, and after some time after laying the egg, keeping them intact inside the mother's body itself. So that is known as ovoviviparity. So some of the snakes are ovoparous or viviparous, and also ovoviviparous. So that particular statement that some species of snakes are viviparous is very correct. Okay. Now, which of the following organisms shows oviparity? These are obviously the birds that you see. There are insects, there's reptiles, there's fishes, there are amphibians. Is this process of oviparity, does it happen internally only or externally? It can happen both the ways. So it can be internal or external. So fertilization can happen both inside the body or outside the body. It leads to laying of eggs. Yes. Nutrients is delivered to the developing embryo via inside structure or the inside composition of the egg, which is the egg yolk. So it is by the egg yolk. Placental connection is there or not? Of course, it is not there in the egg-laying organisms. And then, of course, does it lead to embryo development? Embryo development leads outside the mother body and not inside, as compared to viviparous. Viviparous, if we see, it happens generally in the reptiles and fishes and amphibians and mammals, and because snakes are more prominent amphibians, so they prominently follow the viviparity. Where does the fertilization happens? It always happens inside the womb, and also there's no laying of eggs. The nutrients are directly given from the mother's body only, and placental connection is obviously there, and therefore nutrient transmission takes place. So I hope you've understood the difference. Now, talking about some of the snakes, king cobra. King cobra is known for laying the eggs. So it is oviparous in nature, but most of the snakes, as they are amphibians or they come under the category of viviparous, they give birth to the young ones directly outside the body. Okay. Talking about the venomosity of the snakes, I've already told you that it's not that each kind of snake is, of course, all of them could be poisonous, but not all of them could be venomous. So only some of them could be poisonous or some of them could be venomous. In fact, 4 are there which are venomous in nature: king cobra, Russell viper, saw-scales viper, and the krat. These 3 in India are venomous in nature, could lead to instant death. The other ones are only poisonous, could lead to some of the side effects, could be treated quickly or easily, but not these 4 bites. Now coming back to the PYQs. So here, can we answer this question? Of course, because the word some is associated here. So because we have huge diversity in our biotic fauna and also in the flora. So therefore, whenever the word some comes, it is most likely to be correct, and therefore the answer is all of them. Next question is, which is the only snake that builds a nest? Of course, for a snake to build the nest, of course, it has to be oviparous, which means it has to be laying the eggs. So which of the snake is most likely among them to lay the egg? It is king cobra, and king cobra is the only one. The mother hatches about 50 eggs, contains it inside one nest. And in the year 2011, similar question was asked that which of the following snake builds a nest and what is the purpose of it? So purpose, of course, is to hatch, to fertilize, and to give nutrients to the hatchlings. Now, in the next topic, we are reading about a kind of probiotic recently discovered, and this is a new species, a new variety of lactic acid bacterium which was recently found out. So talking about the probiotics, what are these? So probiotics is something which aids and facilitates the absorption of nutrients inside an animal body. These are nothing but microorganisms themselves, which reside inside the body naturally and aids the absorption, fermentation, decomposition and absorption of the nutrient in the body. So if somebody is having good probiotic content in their intestine, is more likely to grow more healthy or develop more quickly as compared to others who are compromised with it. And this is the reason why antibiotic overconsumption or abuse is one of the issues which leads to many other health issues inside the human body. There are two issues regarding antibiotic abuse. So antibiotic abuse could lead to creation of, first of all, antimicrobial resistance, where if you are trying to treat, let's say, a disease X, or let's say a common cold, and if you are not fulfilling the dosages given by the doctor, then your body or the bacteria that are inside the body, which is supposed to be suppressed completely, because now they are left untouched by some of the over or under consumption of the antibiotic, they will start becoming or generating immune responses against these antibiotics. This leads to a lot of medicines ineffective against some of the deadliest diseases. And so, like for example, we have pneumonia, we have tuberculosis. So one of the biggest menace of AMR is that they render the treatment of these two diseases incomplete. The second thing is dysbiosis, which means, now the second one is dysbiosis, which leads to dysfunction of the absorptive capacities of intestine, basically because of lack of healthy gut microbes. And these gut microbes are nothing but the probiotic receptors. So how do we get probiotics inside our diet? We get it from the fermented foods, we get it from milk, we get it from dairy products, we also get it from the spicy foods. So this is how we obtain the probiotics in our dietary system. Of course, when I'm talking about the lactic acid is something which we get from the decomposition of dairy or milk. So milk, when it decomposes, it creates lactic acid, and this lactic acid also creates a probiotic environment in the body. So this lactic acid bacillus, or also known as lactobacillus bacteria, they are excellent probiotics which aids the digestion and absorption of food in the body. The other probiotic food are, for example, pickles, are also, for example, honey, etc. Now, talking about what happens when the dysbiosis happens, it will lead to inflammation in the stomach lining, it will lead to epigastric burning, it will lead to allergy, it will lead to loss of immune system, lot of diarrhea or stomach aches, etc. So this is what imbalance symptoms are there when the dysbiosis manifests. That is because of lack of probiotics. Along with that, the skin health, eczema, psoriasis, all of these diseases could be more perpetuated inside the body. Why? Because the cleansing is not happening of the gut, and the cleansing of the gut happens because of probiotics. It could also lead to skin health. It could also lead to deteriorating mental health, because mental health is facilitated by vitamin B12 and vitamin D3. Most of them are dependent upon the absorptive capability of the intestine. If these two, which are rarely found, especially in the vegetarian diets, if they are not consumed properly, they lead to a lot of psychotic disorders. So, for example, depression, anxiety, etc. This is mental health. Next, it also leads to inflammation, because our immune system is also rendered helpless when it is not supported by the probiotics inside the body. Then it also hinders the weight management. It also imbalances the gut microbiomes, and it also leads to issues with the cardiovascular health of the human body. So these are some of the impacts, the health related impacts of the lack of probiotic or the imbalance of probiotics in the body. Now, what is the difference between a probiotic and a prebiotic? Prebiotic are something which facilitates the development and production of probiotics in the body. This could be fibers, this could be the sprouts. They facilitates the growth of these healthy bacteria inside our gut. So, it is fiber in the vegetables, fiber in the fruits, which acts as a fuel for the growth of bacteria. And these bacteria are the probiotics. They act as factories to ferment the fibers and the prebiotics and metabolize them in order to create bacteria which are good for the digestion of food. Okay, so these are post probiotics. And what are postbiotics? This is fermented outside the bacteria or yeast, and it contains the beneficial metabolites and it supports your body. So basically, this is the final product which will be fermenting or decomposing the food products. So that is the postbiotics. We cannot create the postbiotics without consuming good amount of prebiotic and probiotic. Of course, some of these can be combined together and can be created into a symbiotic form. So this is symbiotic, where prebiotic, postbiotic and probiotic are combined and given in the form of dosages. So in the previous recitals, we have already read that not all kind of bacteria are bad. In fact, some of them are very beneficial for, in fact, treatment of many diseases and also fighting against diseases and also having more absorptibility of the nutrients that you consume. So in light of that, UPSC in 2022 has asked a very good question on probiotic. The first statement says that probiotics are made up of both bacteria and yeast. So both of them could contain good bacteria. So this is correct. Organisms and probiotics are found in foods we ingest, but they do not naturally occur in our gut. This statement is wrong, because we have already read that most of the probiotic microbiome is already there, naturally present inside the gut, or gut, which is the intestine, right? Next is probiotics help in the digestion of milk sugar. Of course, they ferment it, they decompose it, that is their primary work. They also lead to good absorptibility of the nutrition. So the correct answer is 1 and 3. Now, our next topic is about dark oxygen. We know that the only known process of creating oxygen is via sunlight, and when the photosynthesis is done by the help of plants, then only we are able to get the oxygen that is there. We have already read about the oxygen production by cyanobacteria in the primitive, in the primitive earth or in the primordial earth. Now comes the discovery of another type of oxygen which is not dependent upon light, which is not dependent upon photosynthesis. So is there some other way of creating oxygen? Yes, that too naturally, and that is done deep inside the ocean beds. This kind of oxygen, because it is devoid of any light facilitation, is known as dark oxygen. Dark oxygen was recently found inside the deep ocean beds, which primarily consist of the polymetallic nodules. Since a lot of research operations are going on inside the central ocean bed, Central Indian Ocean bed, we have got huge amount of polymetallic nodules, which are nothing but potato-sized lump, which are very rich in some of the minerals, which are also rendered as critical minerals in current economies of the world. These are manganese, iron, copper, nickel, etc. These heavy metals, when they are compounded in the form of alloys and they are deposited deep beneath the ocean floors, they are known as polymetallic nodules. Nodules, why? Because they are nodulic or potato-like in structure, and polymetallic because one nodule could be comprising of multiple of these metals together, multiple type of these metals together. So around them there was a concentration of a kind of oxygen, and because they were concentrated very deep beneath the ocean bed, they were known as polymetallic lead dark oxygen. Why is this discovery important for us? Because if oxygen is present anywhere across, it will also facilitate the growth of life. Which kind of life could potentially live over here? Because this is a very harsh condition to live. We've already read in the previous article, the archaic kind of life or the archaea branch of the evolutionary tree that will be able to survive in the extreme conditions where there's no light, but at least there's some oxygen. But this could also lead us to discover a lot of things about the primordial universe, the primordial earth especially, as to how and why the oxygen flooding happened across the world. Now the last topic from the month of July is another product, which is ketamine. Ketamine is going to be very important in curing neurological disorders, especially depression, which is growing largely across the world. So what is the context? Reports have suggested that the tablets will slowly, the released tablets of ketamine can slowly improve the symptoms of mental disorders, for example depression, with very fewer side effects as compared to the presently used dosages. Okay, so it is basically created by esketamine, and it has been developed and approved for the treatment, of course, for resisting the depression, and it is approved by US FDA recently. What is this? It was recently it is recently now considered as a treatment for depression, but previously it was an anesthetic, or it was used in anesthesia for relieving the pain. So it was used as this because it blocks the NMDA pathway. NMDA pathway is responsible for our brain to receive any kind of pain signals or any kind of dopamine signals. So that receptor is blocked so that we are not able to feel any kind of pain, and that is why it was used as anesthetic. Now it will also be used as a very important treatment for depression. So how can it be administered? Both intravenously or intramuscularly, orally or nasally, which also makes it multidimensional to be used. What could be the potential risk, as it is there with all the other medications? Because it is interrupting with the NMDA receptor channel of our brain. So of course it could lead to some of the other psychological manifestations which are undesirable. In high dosages could lead to organ damage, could also lead to addiction. So if it is controlled in its amount, if it is delivered in its specific amount, then of course it will lead to curative effects, but in the abuse of the amount, it could lead to other harmful impacts. What is the application? It's a no-brainer and not really important for UPSC, but what we will do, we'll quickly summarize it. It is used as a pain reliever, it is used in pain management, now it is also used as a psychiatric treatment. It can also be sometimes used as a recreational drug which can be abused in parties, and therefore it also needs to be regulated. So this is about ketamine. Ketamine is nothing but a neuroreceptor. It is a histamine, or it can also be called as something which can relieve the neurological disorders. That was it for this month of Recitals magazine. I hope you've liked it. Let me know about your thoughts. Have a good day, and I hope your studies are going on really well.